Joey Clark collects Pixar art. It kind of rhymed. It's a little poetic in a way. But when you think of digital companies, ones that have made movies like Toy Story and Cars and The Incredibles and so many other memorable franchises, you think, oh, what kind of physical things do they have? It's not on animation cells. But it's pretty fascinating. The process of making a cartoon, normally you'd have an artist and they would sketch on a piece of paper. And then you have a different artist that would draw the lines over the celluloid and then they would paint it. And there's a big process. But there's still concept art and there's still mediums that you can hold for digital movies. And that's what Joey Clark collects. And we'll talk about it today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ryan Recker. You can find us on the YouTube page, Animation Cell Talk. If you have any other ones that you would like to see on here or some other collectors you think would be a good interview, feel free to reach out to me on there. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy.
Yeah, I think it's a bit clearer.
You had to do a quick little shirt clean on the lens.
Yeah.
Oh, we've all been there.
Is it clear now? Is it good?
I'm just hoping this microphone stand holds up. I think it will. This is kind of weird. I'm trying a different configuration here. It kind of works, I guess. I don't know. Joey, man, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, of course. I love talking about this stuff. And thank you for creating this show, man. I was debating doing something similar, and I'm like, who's gonna listen to it? Like, is there an audience for this? But I'm glad that you did it, and you're doing a fantastic job. So please keep doing it. Been listening every week so far.
It's a lot of fun. When you messaged me at first and you talked about the collection of Pixar art, the first thing I think everyone thinks of, including myself, was, aren't they all digital? Like, what can you collect? Like, it's all on a computer.
Yeah.
So what are you going to Google search and right click save as? Is that what your art collection is? So can you kind of give me a rundown of what type of physical, tangible art is produced by Pixar in the production of a movie or a TV show?
Surprisingly, like a lot of stuff, at least pre-production, it more so, I guess, for the earlier films. It's kind of dwindled over the years, but I think everything before, about like Cars and before, Ratatouille and before, there's a lot of pre-production artwork that's physically done, in traditional 2D. Also a lot of sculpture work, like maquettes are basically created, so it's before they even put the character in a 3D or model the character in 3D. They make these maquettes as a reference for animators, either while storyboarding or as a reference for the animators to kind of reference and look back at, while they're animating 3D characters. So there is a lot of physical production artwork that is created during the production. A lot of what I have is mostly from Cars. I have like a couple of maquettes. One is a production one from The Incredibles, and then another one is a production sculpt, but it's a limited edition one, which means it's exactly the same as the production one for the most part, but it's something that was gifted to the co-director, and I was fortunate enough to purchase it at an auction. But I do have a production maquette.
Wow. That's all kinds of cool stuff. Do they still do that to this day, or was it up to a certain point they would make these physical items?
I think it's really dependent on which artists are working on the film. Having talked to a number of them, there does seem like there is quite a bit of physical stuff still made, but storyboards tend to be more digital now. Before, there was just thousands upon thousands physically hand done. Now a lot of it is more digital, I would say. There are still traditional artists that work on like concept art, so they'll still do like paintings for certain movies. And you can see them behind the scenes, like some people are working on physical pieces. And it's like, to me, I think it's such a good thing to have that physical production artwork, not just as a collector, but I think it still shows like it's grounded in the old school type of thing when you're working with new school technology. I love both 2D and 3D animation. For me, it's all about the storytelling. So it is a bit sad to see a lot of production companies or studios kind of letting those things die away and not being utilized as much.
So when you have, because I've seen some things you posted, you have a Facebook group Maybe
Yeah.
you should plug that now because you start to post some of your artwork on there. Where can people find your group?
So that group is called Luxo Collectors. It was kind of just started to see if I could, if anyone was like out there and bring them out of the woodwork that collected Pixar artwork, because it is very scarce. I think it is because Pixar, and then it's a fairly young studio. And I think that's why a lot of it hasn't surfaced yet. I feel like maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to start seeing probably more come out of the woodwork. But a lot of it was to kind of post my collection, see if there was any like-minded people out there, and just talk about these cool items that we have.
Luxo meaning what's Luxo? A character?
I mean, Luxo, I kind of called it Luxo Collectors as kind of a reference to that Pixar lamp because it's the Luxo lamp. Um,
Oh yeah. Okay, I get it now. Well,
and
that's
I didn't
cool.
and I didn't want it to be too obvious that there's you know Pixar collectors, like kind of not to hide it, but just kind of a fun turn on the name, I guess.
Yeah. How important do you find the artist is when it comes to some of your Pixar sketches? Is it very important or not so much important? The artist, knowing who the artist is.
I think it's pretty important because a lot of artists have carried over film to film, and I think it's important to recognize the style because it
Hmm.
helps you not only identify who the art or the piece is attributed to, but it's kind of cool knowing that history and how that artist has evolved. And in some cases, like Pete Docter or Angus MacLean, who just did the Lightyear film, that they started off very early in the history of Pixar and how much they've kind of just grown, not only as artists, but also just grown and developing and becoming a bigger part of those stories.
Hmm.
Um, and I do think a lot of artists, you kind of start recognizing their styles, which is cool, but you also kind of see where their, I guess, where their strengths are as far as what parts of the story that they really convey well, and how they kind of improve on those strengths, how they improve upon their weaknesses early on. That's kind of what's exciting for me, is to kind of differentiate the artists. And then you can kind of like, I've talked to a few of them and all been really wonderful, but then you kind of get an idea of like their personality translating it into that artwork.
That's pretty deep. That's a whole different level. Because I collect animation cells.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've ever wondered about the personality of the person that drew this character.
Yeah.
I've never considered that.
I think
Wow.
I think it's harder, honestly, what sells though, because I mean, I do collect them like yourself. I'm a big fan of The Simpsons. I do have one Simpson cell. It's getting framed right now,
Ooh.
unfortunately. But I do get where you're coming from in regards to that. I think a lot of Simpsons artwork, it's a little bit harder to differentiate, I think. I mean, you can definitely feel certain styles if you study it hard enough, especially in the storyboarding process. I think that it's a lot more easy to differentiate, like, oh, that's like David Silverman's scene or another anime, like that's their scene.
Mm.
Um, I think it's a little harder, especially with The Simpsons being more digital. It's a little harder to kind of piece together because it looks more, I don't want to say fluid, but it's, I guess, more consistent because it is so digital now.
Mhm.
And I kind of miss that original, like the original, like first 5 seasons, how they were a little more cartoony, I feel,
Hmm.
in a good sense. Especially like the actions, like of Homer's screams or something along those lines.
Yeah, I know what you mean. More cartoony. I think I know what you mean. Like if you look at the title sequence, when Homer's doing his thing, it's the motions are more cartoony, and he like leans back and he's like grabbing the rod. That's
Yeah,
like more cartoony than it is like realistic that you'd see during the show. But as it progressed later on, I kind of feel even some of the writing in that sense. But it's cool to have a Simpsons piece. You must have a pretty big collection. Simpsons animation art is going for a ton of money right now,
yeah,
uh, a lot of money. So considering where Simpsons are, you can look online. Most stuff goes for $800, right around that threshold, depending on what it is online. If you go on eBay or whatever it is,
yeah,
you might be able to find some stuff a little bit cheaper on some of the other gallery sites. But you get multi characters of the main Simpsons family. Multi-character ones are very pricey in the same scene. Where does Pixar art land when it comes to value? Like, what's the average price range for some of the different items you've seen?
It's interesting that you asked that because it's really, really scarce. It's really hard to determine value, honestly. The funny thing of it is I think I've seen more maquettes than really storyboards or concept art like what I have. Like I have a couple of pieces because I'll tell you the story in a bit, but I have a couple of pieces consigned with heritage auctions. They were what I would consider like extras. Like I don't need to have all of this, in a sense, share the wealth, let other people have a chance at getting these. Um, but the few things that I've seen that have sold, cars, artwork, I've seen storyboards range between like $1,000 and $2,000. But that's through heritage in an auction setting. So
Mhm.
in auction setting, it's kind of like you just never know what's going to happen. You could be bidding against a multimillionaire. It could be someone like me who's, just, working day to day. It really varies. But with maquettes, um, I've seen them range between like $3,000 to a Mr. Incredible, a full size one by Kent Melton. I think just sold for like 10 grand. Um,
Whoa.
so it really, really varies. But again, those are auction settings. I'm hoping the pieces I consign do well so I can get some more art because there's
Hmm.
some out there that I know of. And then incredible concept art and storyboards from Heritage again, because these are most of the prices I've seen them come up in. I've seen them range between about 4,000 to $6,000 just for a
Oh,
storyboard.
wow.
Um, and it's not that it's not beautiful, because I definitely was trying to bid on some of those pieces, but at the end of the day, I can only justify spending so much. I've been very thankful that I haven't had to spend, I guess, crazy amounts of money for the pieces I've gotten. I bought a lot of my Pixar artwork from the son of an artist that worked
Mhm.
on the concept art. So I was very fortunate in that because he was, I don't think he really understood where the value was for it at the time because when I met him, he didn't really know. And I didn't know either because none of his father's stuff had sold.
Mhm.
Some people are really particular about the artists that they collect from, but Pixar art is so scarce. Some people is like, is that real? Is that from there? I don't have anything to compare it to. Um, what is the source on this? And that's a big thing, especially for Pixar, because like I said, it's really scarce. So there's not a lot of examples that you can look at and like, is that real? Because I've never seen this artist's work or whatever.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
The Simpsons, there's an abundance of cells that you can kind of reference, like, oh, the sticker is just right. The painting looks right, the line work looks right. Like this is a Simpsons cell. Um,
I know what you mean. And on top of that, you could hypothetically screen match it. So you can go and say, okay, I'm going to compare it to exactly what's on the screen and see if everything lines up perfectly the way it should. When you're talking about artwork that's done that's not shown on a screen, that's a whole different thing because you have to authenticate it a different way. And when there's
yeah.
not a lot of examples, this is a good thing. How large is your collection? Because you might actually be someone that could authenticate. I think I'm sure there's people that may have something in their collection. They're like, I don't know if this is authentic or not. They have to put it up against something. You might be that thing they put it up against to look at. Have you ever considered helping authenticate pieces?
I think the tricky water, or the waters, the kind of, sorry, the, I think the thing that's kind of hard about that is I've studied it quite a bit. I just wouldn't want to be the one telling someone, I guess, necessarily like that is a piece of that because I don't want to claim to be an expert by any
Mhm.
means. I've
No.
done my research for my own pieces. I'd be willing to help and say, I think maybe if you go in this direction, I'd be willing to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to, I would feel bad if, like I said, yeah, that's the thing, man. You totally got it. But then it ends up being a fake.
Hmm.
I have studied it quite a bit. I still keep trying to learn. reaching out to production sources, sharing what I have, like, hey, do you remember anything like this? Even with the pieces that I know are real, because I always want to know, is there something more to this?
Yeah.
Is there something more to the story that I haven't heard? Um, and then there's sometimes conflicting stories, and you're like, okay, so two people said this and one person said this. Who do we believe today?
Yeah,
So
no
I,
kidding. Who do we
so
believe today? I'm looking at some of the artwork you have up on the Luxo Collectors Facebook page. Beautiful drawings. You have a lot of cars.
yeah, and this,
So is cars like if you were to rank like the top tier, most sought after pieces in Pixar, is cars right up there at the top?
I don't know. It's hard to really I think the top one, honestly, is The Incredibles.
Hmm.
And well, I would say the first Toy Story, then probably Incredibles.
Mhm.
Uh, the reason I say Incredibles is just because there's been more artwork from it, but again, very, very scarce. I've probably seen maybe 5 pieces like available for purchase
Wow. Yeah. That's not
outside
much.
of maquettes. Maquettes I've seen. I think there's been like a full set sold, so that's about 8 or 9 pieces plus like a few scarce storyboards and concept art that I've seen. Um, but I would say if Toy Story art was made available tomorrow or something like that,
Yeah.
I apologize for that background sound. Something just fell.
Was that a
Uh,
cat? I'll get something over.
I think it was just something like slowly tumbling, and I'm just seeing it out of my
Oh,
vision.
you're watching it slow motion. You said
Sorry.
you pulled some artwork to show. I'd love to see some work that you got.
Yeah, of course. I'm trying to think. But yeah, just to finish that answer to the
Yeah.
question, yeah, if Toy Story artwork was made available tomorrow, I think that would be the key because it's the very first movie. And I think when people think Pixar, they think Toy Story. I don't think, I mean, I love a lot of those early films and some of the new ones, but I think that film, it's just so pivotal because it really changed an era of not only animation but filmmaking. So I think that one would probably be the most collectible. However, I think as far as what I've seen in the market and come up, it's been The Incredibles just because there has been more of it available.
Hmm.
But cars, I feel like as far as things that you could probably actually own and buy is probably up there, at least in the top 3 or 5, I would say,
Yeah.
because it
Okay.
has sold very well. But yeah, I can show you a few. I got quite a few things, so it's I don't think where to start.
That's
Uh,
okay. There
actually,
doesn't have to be a perfect starting point. I think we're going to be in awe with whatever you got.
so I think this is kind of a cool example because I have this is like like early concept piece of Mater.
So that's Nader.
Mater.
Mater. That's a whole different attitude than what you see in the movies. Like just by looking at the eyes alone.
Yeah, it's kind of a very, I mean, it was very early into their production as far as like kind of figuring out his design. I will say most all of the Cars pieces I currently have, they're attributed to one particular artist because when I found them, um, the artist is Dave Big Deal, and Dave Big Deal was a artist who was really well known in the racing kind of circuit as far as his artwork. Like he did a lot of artwork for trade shows. He worked, did a lot of art for model cars for like Revell Models and various other companies. And the production designer, Bob Pauly, knew about him and knew about his style with like drawing cars that looked animated. So he brought Dave onto the project because he loved his sense of style, but also being able to maintain, I guess, the car's readability as far as what model they were, what make they were, what year they were. And I've been fortunate enough I purchased all of his artwork for the most part
Hmm.
um, because I wanted to preserve it and save it, but also if there's any other collectors that wanted something that it was available versus it being kind of stored away and not to be seen.
Hmm.
Uh, but then this is another Dave Deal drawing, but it is definitely more the Mater that we know and love today.
Oh, sure. The teeth in the much more softer eyes there. Of course, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny because I have about four variations of this particular drawing. One of them I'm putting up in the Heritage auction in December, but I have two others that I don't want to hoard everything for myself and I want people to have a chance at it. I think it's just trying to figure out what they're kind of worth and what to price them at. Um, because they are really unique, cool pieces and it is super hard to find.
Yeah. Are you worried, because auction sites, maybe it's worth pointing out, you just started recently working for Heritage Auctions, which is really cool.
Yeah,
We'll have to talk about that. But are you worried sometimes that you'll put something like that up for auction? There's not a lot of samples to go off of, and it'll sell for way under what it's valued because someone will look at it and they'll say, it's just a sketch, but they don't understand the importance of what that sketch meant to the artwork and to the making of a classic movie. So that almost seems like that's a scary thing for me. If there's not a lot of other things to put in up as an example, that it might be undervalued or maybe underappreciated, so you won't get the same interest in it.
trust me, that has been plaguing my mind. It's funny that you mention it because I they had just finally put up the descriptions. So you can preview the lot, but the photos aren't up yet um, on the Heritage site. And it was really freaky because it's like, oh God, all right, this is more real than whatever. And it seems kind of dumb to get worried about, but like what you said, it's like I don't need to make buckets of money by any point. As long as I kind of break even, I'm happy because I got really lucky with the pieces that I got. And just for transparency, I did make a deal with um, the estate that I would definitely give a percentage to
Hmm,
them because I
okay.
had no idea what these will go for. So it's because he was really, really sweet. I'll say I won't bring out his name, but it was the son of the artist. And we've definitely become friendly with each other. I consider him a friend, and he's one of the greatest guys I've ever met. But I did tell him, I'll do right by you. I will cut you in on a percentage on whatever this makes because you have not only connected me with the story that I love so much, but it would be wrong for me just to take all of that and as ownership of it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I am really nervous of what it will do because, like you said, there's nothing really to compare it to. I've Heritage usually gets a lot of bang for their buck, um, and they are really fair, and they definitely treat consigners very well. I think
Hmm.
compared to other places, um, and also for transparency's sake, I didn't consign with them while working with them. I consigned with them. I think I dropped off the pieces last December, except for one in like January of this year. Um, but through my interactions with them throughout this process, I'm like, it would be really cool to kind of work with a company that gets to handle like the best of the best.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and it's just as a collector, like I can't say what is at Heritage right now, but there's some really cool stuff in that December auction,
Is
especially
it
if you're.
wait, so it's super secret? Sometimes things are done and you purposely have to be quiet about it?
Yeah, I think it's once they're listed in the auction. I mean, it's fair game to kind of talk about. I think it's
Hmm.
just until then, um, probably keep it on the down low. But I will say, if you like the studio we were talking about, there's a couple of really cool, interesting pieces coming up.
Cool.
Um,
Awesome.
this is just me as a collector. I am not talking for heritage,
Right.
all legal stuff. Like, don't, I'm not gonna get myself in trouble. But it's funny because I remember talking to when I was consigning, I was like, is it okay to talk about this stuff like before the auction? And they're like, Yeah, but just wait till we post it because then it's, more of an advertisement if you want to share it. So that's also kind of the good thing too, is I can't really do it justice until it's posted and you can see it for yourself.
So, by the way, what is that process like with Heritage? So, do people just go into one of their galleries, kind of like Pawn Stars, where they're like, "Here, let me show you what I got, and here's what I want for it." Is it something like that type of process?
It kind of varies. Especially every department is different. So animation is different from like coins or Americana and history or fine art. Usually every consignment they have like a minimum you need to hit, especially if you're a first time consignor like I was. For animation, you have to have roughly about $5,000 worth of value, um, because it's, I guess, taking a risk and making sure that risk is a payoff.
Mhm.
Every other department has their own variation on that. But what I did, I reached out to Heritage through email, and I sent them a bunch of photos like, hey, I found this. This is where I found it. Here's the provenance. Here's some comparison photos. I showed them images from like the Art of Cars book. It's like they're not the exact same. Some of them kind of are, or you can tell by the style, like this is the artist, this is where I
Mhm.
found it. I think a lot of people, including myself at the very beginning, they put a lot of weight on certificates of authenticity. And to an extent, they are decent pieces of paper to have that paper trail, depending on where you're getting it from. But it's really, I think, when you're collecting out in the wild, like I try to, because it tends to be cheaper, but it's also you're getting it from the source. You're not
Mhm.
getting it from, it's not like a third party seller. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just you have to do a little bit more of your homework because everyone gets things wrong, even the experts.
Yeah.
Um, which is why I don't try to pretend to be one, because as though I am a studier of it, I don't want to pretend like I know everything. Um, but
No, I
yeah,
get it.
but kind of to boil it down to answer your question, sorry. It does depend. Sometimes people do bring things in. It's like, hey, can you take a look at this? Typically, that process, because not every single office has an expert in that field or what we call consignment director. Typically, when that happens, if we don't have a CD available, we'll take photos of it and we'll send it to the appropriate department. That's why I always say if you're looking to consign with us, I would check our website, send an email, like a small inventory of what you have, take really good photographs of it, and then we'll take a look at it and see if it's something we're interested in.
Yeah, that coming in reminds me of Pawn Stars, and that's let me warn anyone right now. If you go to YouTube and you watch one Pawn Star video, they're going to recommend it forever. Just
Yeah.
don't do it. It'll curate to the top of your list over and over again, and you're like, I just wanted to watch that one video. I didn't want to see the whole series played out on YouTube. So just a warning for anyone. You said you're getting some of your pieces framed. Do you frame a lot of your pieces? Because the two that you showed us there are framed. Is that kind of what you do for all your artwork?
Yeah, I definitely try to collect to display, and I don't want to feel like I'm hoarding pieces, I guess, if that makes sense. I mean, I do live in a studio apartment, so I mean, to an extent, I can't display everything.
Mm.
Because I also do collect like movie props and wardrobe, which I have no room to display
Hmm.
wardrobe from actors because it's a full size person. But yeah, I try to really display what I do have, and it helps me be a little more selective because I don't want to be inundated with art, at least not in an unhealthy manner where it's just consuming everything. But it is easy to store, which is nice because most of it is flat. But most of my stuff is framed. Like I have a bunch more around me if you want to take a look.
Yes, please. Let's look at some more.
Any
Now, all
particular.
this stuff you're talking about, I'm gonna have to ask you how you come up with the money for all this stuff because this stuff ain't cheap.
So, like I said, the Cars artwork, I got it really, really cheap. I think when I was talking to the head of the estate, and my friend, he didn't really know what to value it at, and I didn't know because I had a ballpark, but the only time I've ever seen his stuff sold was like on eBay through another person who he's a great guy, but he doesn't deal in artwork.
Mm.
Um, and on eBay, it's like you don't know what people are thinking as far as I'm just trying to think of how to explain this. It's kind of a less of like a crapshoot because you don't know, especially if this artist has never been featured before, it's
Yeah.
never been legitimized before. It really is kind of a shot in the dark as far as what it could be. Um, so I think I'm sorry to go back, but yeah, the pricing on it was really all not that bad. That's kind of why, like I said, I'm gonna try to cut him in, or I'm gonna cut him in on whatever that heritage consignments go for. And
Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about what's going to be consigned. I don't think there's any issue with that because the lots are up on the
Yeah.
site. Um, but yeah, it was not that expensive, honestly. I think I
Okay.
got most of my cars pieces for under, I think the whole, everything I got was about under 2,500 bucks.
Not bad, all things considered. That's fantastic knowing that you're getting something that no one else has. It's like kind of it's super unique to a product that people are all very familiar with. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think when I went and because we had actually met out in LA, because they live really in southern, like south of in California. When I went out, a lot of the artwork, not that it was not, it wasn't mishandled, but it was just out in a garage, kind of sitting in some folder. It
Huh.
wasn't being properly stored by any means. And I don't blame the guy because he's not, he is an artist in his own right, but he's also not, I guess it's different because of the artistry that he does. It's not as fragile, I guess you could say. It's not gonna deteriorate nearly as much.
Okay.
Uh,
Sure.
some pieces I found were in really rough condition, and a lot of his father's other work were in rough condition. But
Yeah, and it's
yeah,
like that with cells, Sometimes they store them and they'll be like, "Oh, I kept them in a shed,"
yeah,
and then they pull them out and they're all warped and they smell like vinegar or whatever.
yeah.
And then sometimes they're like, "Okay, I kept it in a shed." You open it up and it looks fine. You just never know sometimes. So I got to see some of this other work that you have there.
Oh yeah, of course. Let me grab some. Do you have any favorite Cards characters yourself, Ryan? I'm curious.
Cars characters, yeah.
Yeah,
So I worked just recently for stations here in St. Louis, so I got to know Bob Costas, and he is Bob Cutlass, like in I
yeah.
think a couple of the Cars things. So whenever I watch those movies with my kid, I keep an eye out for him as the Cars broadcaster or whatever, which is kind of cool.
That's really cool. So this is an early drawing of Ramon.
Oh, look at that. Is there okay? So on above the eyelids, is there words there? I can't see, or is that just like a pattern?
Oh, it's just a pattern.
Oh,
It's like small little circles
oh,
above.
I see. Yeah.
I think it's just kind of one of those early. There's a different year in Paula that I think they were trying to figure out which year they were gonna work on.
Hmm.
Um, I I don't have it with me right now, but so Pixar, there's quite a few like extra things that aren't necessarily artwork that I have that I purchased. Um, but with uh, the artwork, there's like a binder that Dave Deal was sent from Pixar, and it had like reference photos for every single type of card that they were considering using,
Hmm.
and it had like notes from like John Lasseter and Bob Pauly. Um, and actually, it's funny. I have like an itinerary of like one of his like whole days because he had to fly out and be picked up from the airport, and it's like lunch here with John Lasseter, Bob Pauly. Um, I'm trying to remember who else. And it was like a few like really key Pixar people. So it was cool to have that. And then I have like a copy of his contract with Pixar. And the other thing is like I have some like storyboard prints where
Mhm.
it's like markings on it, or it's like Pixar only, confidential, reference only. And it was stuff that he was supposed to send back, but he never did. And it was just funny. And I remember like the estate had told me that Pixar at one point was like, "Do you have anything?" And he said no, because he didn't know.
Yeah.
And well, here we are. uh,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other characters. I love minor characters. Wasn't the Car Guys, the old NPR radio show? The Car Guys were on there. Clink and Clack. They voiced a spot, and I think one of them died, and they still used his voice in I think Cars 3 or something like that. It was left over from I think the first one. I might be completely wrong on that. And then the Cliff from Cheers is the Semi's voice. He's
yeah,
pretty cool. He's a pretty cool dude in all the different movies he shows up in. But yeah, those are I like the side characters. Anytime I watch anything, it's there's always I'm always attached to some of the minor characters that are in it.
no, I totally understand. Like this guy is definitely a favorite piece of mine. It's an early Sarge.
Oh,
The
sure. You know, I interviewed the voice actor for him. Was it Dooley, Paul
oh,
Dooley or something?
I,
I think his name. Um, yeah, back when I think Cars 3 was coming out, he was doing interviews for the movie. That is really cool. Have you seen the people that they put the theory out there with that character? They said, well, if Sarge exists, then there was a World War II in the Cars universe, which means there was a Auto Hitler somewhere out there.
he probably would have been a Mercedes Benz.
Something German car, yeah. Uh,
uh,
wow.
I got a few more. I mean, I can just do some more show and tell if you'd like.
I love it. Please. I love this.
So to kind of step away from characters now, when I was consigning, I had sent this image, but I'm really glad I didn't consign it because this is a location drawing, and it was an early iteration of what they were trying to figure out what Flo's VA Cafe was going to be.
Hmm.
And the name, I'll explain it when I show it.
Oh, wow. Pharaoh. Uh, interesting. Now, what does it say underneath Pharaoh there?
So it says, Pharaohs are coffee will wake you up.
Interesting.
So I guess they have coffee in the Cars universe, apparently.
Yes, they
Uh,
would. So yeah, Flo's the V8 diner. Is that what that turned
yeah.
into?
And then, yeah, it is. So they named it Pharaohs, I think, after the gang. This was like an early concept, and they had gone with the name Pharaohs as kind of like a callback to American Graffiti because that was the gang in American Graffiti.
Oh, interesting. That is pretty cool.
The
Yep.
thing about this piece is it's one of the few that's like really well shaded. It's got ink on it, and you can just see the little nuances and details of like the cars, how they have their eyes.
Yeah,
Um, I remember, like I said, when I was consigning, they were really wanting me to put it in the auction, but I was like, there ain't no way I'm getting rid of that.
that's cool. How would you like to sit in that room where they're coming up with this concept art and they're pitching this, and then they're coming up with the pros and cons, like they're trying to decide if this is what they want to go. I'd love to hear their conversations of why they decided against that, why they thought it was, why the artist, what they would have said to defend it, things like that.
I would have killed to have been in that. Just kind of an explanation of why I collect personally is because, I want to be a screenwriter. So I kind of collect from the films that inspired me. Um, and it's funny that you mentioned those story conversations because those are the conversations I have with myself when I'm writing. Like, is this choice appropriate? Does it fall in line with everything else that I've established so far? And I guess if I had to guess why they chose not to use that particular concept, I think it might have kind of pigeonholed it, I guess, in a specific time era because it is that kind of diner. And I think Flo's V8, it is of the time, but it's still able to kind of pull off a sense of being in the modern era, where that I feel like might have been too much of the time. If I had to guess, I don't know
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, Pharaoh seems oddly specific in that sense. V8's more generic. It seems
Yeah,
like at least more fitting to a town in the middle of nowhere, named
yeah,
after something like that, I guess. Plus all the merchandising that come off of all these characters too. I think
yeah.
about it because my kid's got a V8 set, a Lego set or whatever that he bought and put together or whatever.
Yeah.
And man, you think about all the ripple effects one decision makes and everything else that comes after it. Because I mean, it would have changed everything with merchandising the movie, how the characters interact. I mean, it's just a million things would have changed after that.
It's funny that you mentioned changes because there's a piece that I do have that's in line with this, but a character piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard some conflicting stories about this piece, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So this is an early concept for Sally, and initially the story goes that she was supposed to be a Mustang, so Mustang Sally,
Oh yeah, yeah.
as a reference to an older song. I can't remember the name of the artist off the top of my head, but it was supposed to be kind of just a reference and nod to that. And this is definitely what you would call more of a Dave Deal piece because he definitely tended to do this more kind of hot roddy look in his other typical work. So it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of cool to have this. But not only in that sense, but most of the Pixar concept art, if it has any type of ink or like color embellishment, for the most part, they have it in their archive. Uh,
Interesting.
so it's one of the few pieces that I guess he was able to hold on to that had color.
That's
Uh,
cool. And then, of course, with the mat, you get to color match it. It makes it look so much cooler
yeah,
in the frame.
uh,
It looks great.
I love that piece. And it's funny because I talked to the head of, I guess it's a weird kind of title because he's the head of the Cars franchise now. And I spoke to him, I want to say about a month ago. And I was asking him, so what's the story behind Mustang Sally? Because I've heard a couple different things. And he was saying it was something that Dave Deal just created on his own. But I don't think that's necessarily the truth because I've looked at, there's a guy named Jorgen Klubian or Jorgen Klubian who's a really well known storyboard artist. And he had a concept that he did of Mustang Sally. And from what I remember, Sally was initially supposed to not necessarily be the love interest. She was supposed to be kind of, I guess, like Flo, where she was a bit older and kind of
Mhm.
um, not a foil to his character, but kind of one that pressed his buttons or whatever, and kind of a fun sensibility. And then she eventually developed into the Portia that we know and love.
That's cool. It's got to be hard because these companies, I'm sure when it comes to talent, there's a lot of uh, talent that are outside of the United States. So, like if you're in the tech industry, you're Google or Apple or whatever, there are always recruiting people from all across the world, these
Yeah.
brilliant tech minds. If you're writing for Pixar and something like Cars, it seems like it would be nearly impossible with all the American references that everyone grew up knowing that if you were from another country, you wouldn't have any reference point to. None of this would make any sense to you.
I think to some extent you are right, but I think having, visited other countries and having like international friends, I feel like American culture, not that it's necessarily adopted, but I feel like a lot of other places study our culture,
Mm-hmm.
uh, especially when it comes to like pop culture. Like, there's not many other countries except for maybe like India with Bollywood that have, a Hollywood where it's really dedicated to filmmaking.
Hmm.
And a lot of other countries license our TV shows and our movies. Not that to say that they don't have any film culture, but it's not as prevalent or focused or emphasized as we do here or they do in India and Bollywood. So I think a lot of people do pick up on our references just because they kind of adopt our pop culture in some sort of way.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Well, of course, American media shown all across the world. I guess depending on where you live, maybe you get your impression of high school from Say by the Bell. It's
Yeah,
not, it's close. It's not, might not be exactly the same.
yeah. I feel,
Wow. So
yeah,
you mentioned the pieces you frame. So you get everything professionally framed.
yeah, I try to. Pretty much everything I have is professionally framed, just because I do worry about it being well preserved, because it's, I think with Pixar, just to kind of point back on the scarcity of it, it's, I'm constantly afraid that it'll deteriorate. And that there's so, I think it would be different, say, not that Simpsons sells, because you, I love the I have a Simpsons tattoo. But I guess I wouldn't be as scared about it, just because there's such an abundance of it. Unless it was like the early seasons, then I would probably be a lot more precious. But I still take care of them. I still get them professionally framed. But I'm not as scared of that, say, deteriorating over some of these, because the value is higher, it's more scarce, and it's because a lot of it has either ended up destroyed, or it's in the Walt Disney archives or Pixar archives, never to be seen again.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I can talk for hours on why that upsets me on its own, as far as the archives, um, in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. You think about that. What was it? The Library of Alexandria that burned? Now, there is a lot of myth to that because apparently there was a lot of backups and things. So it's not like all of the world history was gone when something like that went up in flames. But
Yeah,
the idea of a central location going down could be devastating. Imagine if whatever that warehouse, if something were to happen to it, the amount of history that would have been erased because they centralized it in one area and won't allow people to get into it.
that's a big argument, honestly. Because it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've talked, I think the head of the Walt Disney Archives, I think she is fantastic, and I think she's genuinely open to people seeing the material.
Mhm.
I think I have some issues with, say, like a Lucasfilm archive, in a way where I've heard that if they don't have the space, they destroy it.
Oh boy,
That's
yikes!
the mandate. And it's like, that's insane. But I guess that's the mandate for a lot of archives, is when they run out of room, they will destroy artifacts. And
Well,
a lot of people don't know that.
well, broadcast is like that too. Like pretty much every radio station I know of destroyed their archives because they ran out of space. BBC even ran into that in the early days. They weren't necessarily saving everything they were broadcasting. I know there's a lot of Doctor Who fans that are trying like crazy to find some of the lost episodes because they just didn't save them like they used. You know, they started different protocols to saving their materials after a certain year. But you know, anything before that, man, it was you had to be lucky if they sent a copy out and it was just like a lost copy for decades or whatever. But I think if anything, people are more interested in preserving it today. That really surprises me about Lucasfilms if they're still thinking that they can't preserve or store these things. That's like crazy to me because I think everyone understands there's a value in those things that they have that much more valuable than just destroying it.
I know that was the thing. It's like, I mean, auction it off for charity or something. Like, do something worthwhile with it. And I think since they're finally doing that Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, hopefully that practice has been abolished. But I've heard, they did destroy a lot. I've heard a lot of stuff on their shelves just kind of gathered dust from friends that have visited that archive. Um, but to kind of switch it back onto focus on animation, I think my biggest issue, I don't mind that there's a lot of stuff in the archive by any means. I think it's important that they think it's important. And I know that they do exhibitions, but to me, with a company that's made so much money over the years off of the general public, make a museum to show. I mean, it's kind of giving back to us as fans, but it's also, it could be a whole money house for the Walt Disney Company. And I think it should be shown off. And that's kind of my issue, is like, I have my pieces, but I am willing to lend them out to people that can, handle them appropriately and show them off. In fact, I don't have it with me today because it's being loaned out to a friend who has an exhibit in Las Vegas. But I have that Soli maquette that I mentioned, for Monsters Inc. it's being loaned out because I want people to see it and, get the same feeling I get when it's in my possession. And that's being lent out indefinitely until whenever I want it back. But as long as it's making people happy and not in some box, I don't mind um, doing so. And I've reached out to museums even to show these pieces off because I love having them in my possession. But if it gives someone that little extra boost of confidence and wanting to be an animator, or, spark something, then that's fine with me because it does that for me. I don't need every single one of my pieces around me to be happy or to get it. Just a couple.
Wow. Well, how many pieces in total do you think you own that are framed at least?
Let's see. Including everything outside of Pixar or just Pixar?
Just let's say just Pixar.
Let's see. So three, four, five, six, seven. I think in total, after everything's done, it's probably about 10 plus another two for the maquettes, because one of the maquettes, it doesn't have a display yet, but the one I have in front of me that I'll show you in a bit, I have an acrylic case around it.
So how many of them are you going to have up for auction with Heritage Auctions?
So I'm trying to remember the exact count. I think because they grouped them together in lots, which I don't know if it was the best thing to do, but we'll see. Because there's two Sarge drawings in one lot, so it's a two for one thing. There's a couple of Doc Hudsons in another lot. I think it's like two or three, so that's five. There's a Lightning McQueen drawing that's like an ink drawing, and with a Sally ink drawing, and that's in another. So there's like five lots total, and then there's another lot that has a Mater piece, and sorry, I'm just trying to think.
Man, that's a
And
lot of big characters, big names.
and there's
Uh,
a
was
random.
it hard to? I mean, was it hard to list that? You're like, I know that I've done that too with my animation cells. I prune them a little bit. Like, do I really need three of this one character? Do I even need two of this one character? If I can pick the one that I like the most, can I just be happy with that one, and then the rest I can sell or whatever it is? Was it hard to make that decision going through that artwork, knowing how rare it is, and you're like, I could sell it now. There's odds of me ever getting another one is next to nothing because how rare these things are. So it must have been a hard decision.
It was, but I think what I kind of boiled it down to was I don't need everything. There's other pieces that I still want to get, and I call it, in at least in like movie prop collecting, we call it like funding the war chest. Um, so when that really cool piece comes up, you can
Yep.
go to war and be like, yes, I'm gonna get it.
Yes.
So it's not like it's, um, I guess you can say it's not like I can sleep okay at night, except it's funny you mentioned if it's hard. I did ask for one piece back, and they were nice enough to let me have it because they didn't see it as being a super valuable piece. It was actually, I was going to consign a Luigi drawing.
Hmm.
Um, that one is getting framed, but if you want, I can share it on the screen of what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm looking at because this is the one you posted up on your Facebook group a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I think I even posted like update it's back or something
He's
like.
coming home to me. Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to share that, that's fine. But yeah, it was because it's the only example of that piece. And then the other part of me that really worried about it was like, say this one piece goes to a collector that doesn't know what they're doing and they just spent a lot of money and they don't know how to properly preserve it and then it's destroyed. That was kind of the thing where I'm like, there's only one of these. There's other examples of each of the characters that are being sold, and I still at least have one, but this one doesn't have any others. And the other thing that's cool about that drawing that made me want it back more was because I think you can see it in that Facebook post. It's the preliminary drawing to that final drawing. So you know that it is kind of that final mindset of
Right.
what the character is. Um, so yeah, that was a I was like, I need it back. Can I please have it back? I know that the policy, and they're like, yeah, we can send it back. I think they were just happy that I didn't ask for like Lightning McQueen or Sally.
Yeah.
I do have two. Um, I have one of Sally and McQueen, but those are also getting framed right now. But I'll post them at some point because I know that's probably what everyone wants to see. um,
It's some really remarkable stuff.
the funny thing is I love Lightning, but my favorite character, and this was the first piece I had bought from that estate, and it is the one Cars piece. If I had to sell everything else, this is the one I would keep. And it's not trying to hype it up too much, but it's just a very simple concept drawing of, not simple, but I just love Doc Hudson so much.
Of course. Super cool. Oh yeah, look at that. Is this the one well, it's similar to the one that you have as the header of the Facebook group, but not quite.
Yeah.
That's just beautiful. Yeah, that is really cool. Do you like it? Is he your favorite because it's your first in the collection, or did you get it as your first because he's your favorite?
I got it first because it was my favorite.
Yeah.
I always, I don't know why I always connected with that character so much, but I always loved him growing up. And like one day when I make it as a screenwriter, I want a Hudson Hornet as a car. Like I love that design. It's a beautiful car. Um, but yeah, I love that character a lot. And like yourself, like I really enjoy side characters, and I love him. I love Sarge. The one
Mhm.
character I haven't found anything for because he's like a really close second favorite though is Fillmore,
Hmm.
um, the VW bus,
Gotcha.
and I've been trying and trying to find something, and he didn't have anything from that character, and I know there's got to be something out there with him. Um, but yeah, that's a. I
That is
hope.
super cool.
Yeah, because the examples I don't have. I don't have a sheriff. I don't have a Guido, and I don't have a Lizzie, a Red, or a Mac.
So are
Oh,
you trying to like hit the cycle? Do you want to be able to get all the characters?
I think it would be cool to at least have an example of each one. Um, Preferably, I like the concept stages a lot better because you can still tell which character they are. But I do kind of like when it comes to like Pixar movies, I do like the rougher kind of earlier looks. I think they're just a little more compelling and more interesting to me. Um, like I love Mater, but I do like seeing that original design for him because you can see it in the behind the scenes of Cars actually, a drawing like the final drawing of that drawing, and it always stood out to me because it's just like this is what it was and now it's here, but I always love seeing what it was.
Yep.
um,
There's a junkyard in St. Louis that has a Lightning McQueen and a Mater based on the model of the car that they fixed up. So they
yeah,
have it at the front of their lot, and kids will stop by and take pictures with it. Um, they also have one of the helicopters, and I can't remember what that Pixar movie was. And then they got a Ghostbuster hearse out there. It's kind of cool, little deal for the kids to take pictures of or whatever. But that drawing you showed of the Mater before, man, there's such big differences there. There were lots of decisions made between that version and what they decided with, and it's just so fascinating. I'd love to hear why they went one way and not the other on characters like that. Because if you think about Mater, it's such an iconic character now. It's something that it was like he's got his own spinoff. He became that popular, and I can't see Larry the Cable Guy voicing your drawing.
yeah, I think it would be more of a Doc Hudson type sounding character if it was looking like that. I think to answer your question a little bit, because I've heard like whispers and things, I think a lot of it was to kind of soften the tone of the cars. Um, Not because I always kind of subscribe to Brad Bird's theory of animation, where it's like it's not kid stuff, it's just a way of telling movies, but I think they kind of wanted to soften it a bit for younger audiences. I think the initial drawings to kind of like be a little more lively and be able to be more playful. I've heard kind of whispers on that, but never have gotten a definitive answer
Yeah.
as far as the design change. Um, but to
Are there
switch,
any? Oh,
oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead.
Are there any big mysteries in the Pixar community? Things that you wish you knew the answer to?
Are you talking about kind of like the theory that like all the Pixar movies intertwine or something else?
Oh, well, it doesn't have to be that. I just meant sometimes I'm sure you've come across a piece of art or anything and you've looked at it and you said, I don't understand this. Or there could be, um, well, I guess there's always the Carlin brothers do those theories on YouTube. They like to talk about the Pixar and Disney theories or,
Yeah.
how the universe is combined. And here's the little clues of things like that. Are there any mysteries to the Pixar anything, either in front of the camera and what you'd see on the film or even behind the scenes that have always perplexed you, things that you just haven't quite figured out an answer to?
There's a few things honestly like that. So from what I've heard, especially with cars, because a lot of theories are like, so how do they have kids? How do they decide who's race cars and who's normal cars and things like that? Because I don't know if you've ever seen like there's deleted scenes for cars, and there's one where they take the engine block out of Lightning McQueen, which is I guess like his brain in a scene, and then they put it in some dumpy old car, and then I guess what was Mater goes into Lightning McQueen's body like some weird mad scientist thing, and then he
Mhm.
runs off with his with his muscle car body base or his hot or as a NASCAR body. And I'm like, that would have been free, but I think it ended up like it was gonna be like a dream sequence or something. Um, but yeah, cars there's a lot of like questionable things where you're like, so there's a lot of human like the thing you mentioned with like World War II, so there must have been a World War II. Um, So it's like, okay, so to what extent are cars human-esque and where's the dividing line? Like, is a kid just a young car that you buy off an assembly line or something like that? That movie makes it leaves you with a lot of questions as far as how the world works, but I love it. I think the other thing that movie has a very odd history behind the scenes too, because I don't know the answer to this, but I know that there was some kind of drama where I guess Cars wasn't really John Lasseter's idea. It was another artist, Jorgen Klubian's idea. Then John Lasseter kind of saw the images of it and was inspired to have a car related movie, but then switched the storyline to being something with how it is, how like a race car needing to slow down and enjoy life because
Mhm.
John Lasseter was at that point in his life because his career had consumed him. And then he went on a road trip and was like, okay, now I'm inspired. But then Jorgen Klubian is also credited for the story, but it's never
Hmm.
really talked about. So that's one of those kind of weird things about it. But I think that's probably one of the more, I guess, troublesome stories. I've always been wondering what's the reality of that.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
that's interesting. The Marvel has that too. With is it Stan Lee and Kirby when they talk about who really invented what, and there's always
yeah,
those sort of debates. Does Stan Lee get too much credit, and the other guy, I think it's his name was last name was Kirby, doesn't get enough or something like.
yeah,
There's always those different things when artists that have a lot of fame and a lot of prosperity because of what they created. There's always the okay, who really created what? Where did it come
yeah.
from? And people always question those things. Um, wow. Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should, or do you have any other examples you want to show?
I think it would be sacrilegious if I didn't show this.
Oh, look at that. What is that made out of technically?
So, from my understanding, I think it's a resin cast or
Hmm.
resin polyurethane, some kind of composite. Um,
That's cool.
so that is the piece that goes with me to my grave. Um, well, at
You have
least
a special
donated.
compartment.
Yeah. Or at least donated, and my name is really big next to it. Like, don't forget where this came from.
That
Uh,
is cool.
but that is my favorite film of all time, The Incredibles. So this piece is really cool because it is the very first 3D iteration of Bob Parr slash Mr. Incredible.
Hmm.
That was sculpted by the character designer Tony Fucilli. Um, it was actually done before the production of Cars really even started, and it's funny how close this design is to the final in the movie. So when I was showing it to storyboard artists, because the story team is typically the first ones hired on, all the storyboarders, and when I showed it to a handful of them, they were like, "That's really cool." And I was like, "Well, do you know much about it?" He's like, "That was before my time," when they were on the production of it from
Mhm.
nearly the beginning. So, and then I asked another one, and he was like, "Yeah, I think Tone just was screwing around and wanted to try to sculpt something." Um, so how maquettes are made is that they're sculpted out of clay first, and then they're cast, and then they'll make some like resin versions of them. Because typically the clay model doesn't survive that casting process. So
Mhm.
these are like the only examples usually left. I don't know if this, if the clay one exists still of it, it might, but this is truly a production maquette where it was used. I don't know how many have been made. I've been trying to find that answer. But from my understanding, very, very, very few of this
Wow.
particular. Um, this probably, as far as animation goes, it's the most expensive piece I've had, but it was, considering what maquettes go for in the history of this piece and where it came from, it was a steal.
Can we
Uh,
see it again? Can you show it one more time? How much
yeah.
does it weigh? Is it heavy or is it light? Does the case weigh more than the piece?
No, the case is pretty light, but the piece I would say is at least 10 pounds or so.
Wow.
And I love that side profile a
That
lot.
is cool.
But no, he is my I it's that movie has made so or meant so much to me because when it came out when I was 7, I watched in the theaters, and then when the DVD came out, and this is kind of the spiel I always give, like when I'm reaching out to people that worked on the film to see if they have anything. And it's the truth is when the DVD box set came out and it came with like the bonus disc, it had all the bonus features, which included like the making of, and I would watch it relentlessly on repeat. And I didn't really know why I did. I just thought Brad Bird was like this awesome madman making my favorite movie with
Mhm.
like his best friends. And to see the artwork, like that was the first time I think as a kid where I was like really into art, and just seeing those pieces come to life and it informing my favorite movie was just epic. And it's something throughout my life that I've always referred back to when I'm feeling down creatively or need like a boost. I watch those behind the scenes because I know I can do it in some way, some form. And this, I don't know if it's exactly this one, but at least one of these busts is in that behind the scenes. And it's funny because it's they're arguing about the character design, and he's like, if we put more hair on him, he's gonna look like a jerk. And then it cuts to this scene where Lou Romano, who was a concept artist on it, um, and he's also the voice of Linguini and the teacher in Incredibles, he's like pretending like, for years we've had this and now you wanna, and then he's like faking like peeing on it like a dog and then like stepping on some grass over it. And he really fought hard to keep this version of Mr. Incredible in, and thank God for that. But it was funny because it was videotaped for the behind the scenes of how
Wow.
passionate he was about that design. Like, keep it, keep it. Um,
That's special. That is so cool.
but I love that piece. Like, if there's very few pieces where I'm like, this is, I absolutely love it, and it's definitely this one.
There it is. You said you want to be a screenwriter.
Yeah.
What kind of story would you tell? Do you have any way you'd lean? Would you tell a story like The Incredibles? Would it be something completely different? What have you thought about? What style you would write in?
I definitely like telling. I like comedy a lot. There's a lot of ideas that I've had, especially lately percolating. It's funny. I was talking to my girlfriend this morning and last night about just a few things that have come to mind. I think the hardest thing is like, there's a good idea, or you have like a list of them, but you don't know which one to start on first because
Hmm.
all of them have their unique things about them. But I kind of tend to stick more with comedy. I think I've been trying to search for something that can be like a Pixar film where it's not kiddie, but it can appeal to both, adults and kids at the same time, but still being mature enough to, tell a really cool story.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's honestly one of the hardest things to do because I think telling adult stories is not too difficult because I'm already in that mindset. Um, and I think it's just being careful and smart enough with your language where you don't need to, divert to like obscenities and crazy language. And
Yeah.
it's really refining it and hitting those key moments. Um, but yeah, there's a couple ideas. There's a stop motion idea I have that I think could kind of be somewhat Tim Burton esque, so
Cool.
it can play to that sensibility. Um, yeah, there's a few ideas I have in the pipeline, but I don't think anything superhero related at the moment. I think The Incredibles is first and foremost a family film about a family.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think it's a superhero film, but I don't think that's not the first thing it
Right.
is.
No, I get that. Yeah. Was it Pixar several years ago came out with a video series on storytelling where they put it was almost an informative series. Like, here's how you tell a story. And I thought I don't remember where they posted it, but it was like a multi-video series on storytelling. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I think it's on Disney Plus, or at least some iteration of it, because I think you're right. They go into like character design and like lighting and various like components of storytelling.
Yeah. It's kind of an
Um,
interesting thought.
I think
How
the
they tell a story. It makes you think. It's a unique thing anymore. There's so many different storytellers out there, I guess, but you don't see. I don't know. It's weird because when YouTube came around, there were a lot of people that said this is going to be my medium to tell
Yeah.
a story, and then what do we get? We go to YouTube, and it's like, oh, another reaction channel. Ugh. It's like you have this endless opportunities to do a million different things, but when
Yeah.
they start to do it, they realize it's really hard. So
Yeah.
it's hard to stick with things like that.
No, it is. I mean, for me, like I have two second drafts of scripts, but it's like another idea pops up, and sometimes it's good to just make space between yourself and a project because if you've been focusing on it for months, you kind of got tunnel vision and you're just like, this is the only thing that my life is consumed around. What is eating? What is all of this other stuff I should be doing? And it's hard because I think a lot of writers, a lot of the big thing that we always joke about that the most important part of writing is not writing.
Hmm.
And I should be more on top of it than I am. But it's weird because I also feel like if I was so on top of it, I wouldn't be making observations for other types of ideas and projects to kind of store away that I would have kind of that tunnel vision. So
Hmm.
I should be more focused, but I've also been glad in the moments I haven't been because it's given me a chance to think about other things which inform new ideas for
Great.
stories. But
Well, is there anything else we didn't talk about that you'd like to bring up?
um, I'm trying to think. I think that pretty much covers it. I would just say, like, if you do have Pixar artwork or you think you might have something, bring it all to me. I'm just kidding. But if you ever want to talk about it for anyone out there that might have something, feel free to share it. Ask questions. I'm happy to share any information I have about mine. I just probably won't give you names of sources, and I don't expect the same unless you're like, this guy wants to sell you something. Then by all means, feel free to reach out. Um, but I would just say if you are interested in collecting it, I would just say save your money because Pixar is really expensive. Be very selective about the pieces that you get in general. I was fortunate enough, but with that fortune came a lot of research and a lot of time and a lot of just kind of self-sacrifice to kind of, motivate myself or whatever to kind of pursue it. So don't feel discouraged. It took me over a year to find my first Pixar pieces. And actually, just a quick story about this Mr. Incredible bust. I had been looking forever for incredible stuff and been researching it. And then one day I found it on a website at some animation like online store, and I had emailed them because it said still for sale, and I'm like, I'll buy it. I got a reply back, oh, we're waiting on another guy to pay for it. And I was like,
Ah,
it says for sale. And they're like, well, we're giving him a week. And then like he ended up buying it, and I was like, dang. And then about 4 or 5 months go by, and I'm bidding on this big Mr. Incredible maquette that came up on Heritage. And then once it got to like the $8,000 mark, because I had been saving and like storing away stuff to like sell because I knew I could get money for it.
mhm.
Once it passed that, I'm like, I don't want to put myself in this ridiculous situation where I have to pick between eating and a thing that I don't necessarily need. We don't need any of this, people. I know I need to tell myself that more often, but yeah, besides the point. And then it was sold, and I was like, oh, God. And then the next day comes around, and then the animation gallery reached out and like, do you want to buy that Bob bust? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, the guy wants to sell it. And I'm like, thinking in my head, he bought the big one and now he needs money. So he's selling the small one. And I'm like, yes. So I know that he must have bought it because it was literally the day of or the day after that one had sold, because it sold for
Mhm.
like 10 or 12 grand. Um, and then, and it's like, I'm kind of glad I lost it because in my mind, even though it's not the full body, this one is more important
Hmm.
historically because this is the first one. There's so few of them.
Yeah.
It's done by the character designer who's not, I don't want to say he's not a sculptor, but that wasn't his expertise. It was just something that he really enjoyed and took a shot at. And I like it because if you look closely, it is more rough. It's not nearly as refined as the Kent Melton Incredibles maquettes. It's still a very beautiful piece, but it's not picture perfect, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
But it's a beautiful piece. And I'd actually rather have this than the big one any day.
So you might be the first person ever to have lost a bid and still won. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
And I didn't need to spend as much money for
Yeah,
this.
exactly. And you got
It's
something, you got a beautiful piece in the end. That's wonderful. And you got what you wanted. Even better.
and, and it was a like honestly, it was like a quarter of the price of the big one. So I was like, I was willing to spend this much and now I only have to spend this. So it's not that bad and I could sleep fine. And yeah.
And then how many? So when they shipped that to you, I'm guessing they shipped it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you even ship something like that. Like it, I would be so nervous that, of course, through shipping, something gets turned upside down or whatever happens. And, who knows? But I bet you were refreshing that tracking number about 1,000 times before it came to your front door.
I was so scared, man. It was weird because I went to the UPS store because it said it had been delivered. So I'm like, I gotta go, I gotta go. And I went, I was like, hey, this is my tracking number, whatever. Um, and they were like, we can't find it.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what do you mean you can't find it? Like it says it's here. And I'm like internally freaking out while trying to be really nice because if I like I'm usually fairly nice when it comes to customer service, but I was like almost about to freak because it's like I've been waiting for months and if this thing is broken or something, I'm gonna be like crestfallen.
Mhm.
and like I'm hearing the box because they're like, oh, actually we found it, and then like I'm hearing it moving, and I'm like, is it broken? So I
Oh
just like,
no.
and I like open it up. I'm like, oh god, it's fine. It
Wait,
was
did you
just,
open it in store?
I think I waited till I got home because if it would have been broken in store, I think I would have like screamed.
Yeah.
But I
Did
just
you
waited
buckle
till
the thing into your car seat?
maybe. It was like I said, it's a piece from the movie, and it's like there's not many where I would be that scared about it, but this one out of any of them has been like the one where I'm like, I can't let this anything
Yeah.
happen. Everything else, I mean, I take handle it with care, but it's like I've never seen one of these before outside of that video and
Right.
being that picture on the website, and it's like, thank God it survived. Um, because I've heard some horror stories with UPS.
Oh boy. Well, your Facebook page, Luxo Collectors, I've had it up and I've been, scrolling through some of the pictures and things you had, which is really good because a few of them that you showed off here today are up on the Facebook page. So it's a private group. So if anyone watching this wants to get in, they can just message you to be lit in.
Oh yeah. So the only reason I keep it private is just kind of I don't want, I guess, lingering people in the sense where it's not lingering. I don't want a Pixar legal or something lingering about because there's a lot of cases, even when pieces are legitimately sourced, studios will still try to find a way to shake the nest and be like, it's ours. It's like, well,
Mm,
here's the chain of evidence, but I also don't want to deal with that. Like, I'll be straight up where this came from. This was gifted by Kent Melton, or it was gifted by Tony Fucilli to Kent Melton
mm,
after the production. So, and then Kent Melton sold his pieces, so they were rightfully his to this animation gallery. Um, so it's, and everything I have is legit, but it's also, like I said, like a big one, an example like in the 90s when people were like having and showing off original Star Wars trilogy pieces.
mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff was kind of discarded from at least like the first movie, but anyone that claimed to have anything, Lucasfilm was like sending out lawyers and being like, it's ours. It's like, no, you threw it away, you discarded it. It's kind of up for grabs unless we truly stole it out of your archive.
Yeah.
I just don't want to deal with it. And it's a big issue with Disney stuff. Um,
Yeah. Once it's tossed, it's the Better Call Saul argument. If a hobo can get it on the street, then it's not yours anymore, or something like that. I can't remember what the argument was, but whatever the legal justification was for him finding documents that were thrown away. Hey, if a hobo can get to it, then it's over.
I don't think they've been as bad as I'm making them out to be, but I think it's just more of a precautionary thing because it's not something as a collector you ever want to deal with, and you don't want to buy illegitimate pieces by any means. And I would never recommend doing that. It's just I think just being careful with what you do share because even if you own it outright and you have the chain, it's like you don't want to deal with the hassle of some mouse lawyer being like, it's ours. And
What you mean?
some Pixar artists tried to tell me, like, kind of undermine my pieces or whatever when I reached out to him. He's like, well, if those are legit. And I'm like, some of them are very much company men and women where they're
Sure.
like, die hard for the company. And it's like, you gonna tell me you don't have anything that you didn't take from work or storyboards that technically belong to the company but they threw away and you're just like
Yeah. And a lot of times, even in radio, sometimes it's stuff that was thrown away that, someone that worked at the station's like, maybe I'll hold on to this because I want to digitize it or whatever, some of these
yeah.
old tapes. And if it wasn't for that, things would have been gone forever. These enthusiasts that recognized that there was significance in archiving and preserving that history. And if it wasn't for them, it wouldn't have been known and it would have been gone forever.
It's kind of how I look at the Cars pieces, because if they would have just sat out in that garage much longer, it's like I don't know what would have happened. And I don't want to like pat myself too much on the back, but for me, it was really just kind of preserving and being able to maintain them, because they do deserve respect because of their history and what they contributed to that film. Um, and I think a lot of collectors, I don't want to tell anyone how they should do it, but in my mind, I think if you're collecting something that has, significance to our culture and to pop culture in general, it's something that should be preserved and maintained,
Hmm.
and not so haphazardly done. Like if you're going to do something, do it right, in my mind.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, Joey Clark, this was a lot of fun, man. These times, these interviews, they go by fast.
Yeah,
We got to be getting close to an hour and a half or so, somewhere a little close to an hour and a half, not quite there, but man, these conversations are fascinating to me because I learned more about Pixar art than I ever would have known. I mean, I focus a lot on that production animation cells and things, but this is
yeah,
such a whole different world. I'm so glad that you took some time to explain and open up a whole new world to me when it comes to art collection. So thank you so much for doing this.
of course. And thank you for taking an interest in it. I'm glad I got to talk to you about it. And thank you for the show, man. Like, it's enjoyable to watch. And I'm looking forward to, well, I'm looking forward to hearing you talk to me. I'm not looking forward to hearing myself talk. But thank you so much.
Joey Clark in his Pixar art. He's got a lot of cool stuff to look at. And I really want to thank him for reaching out to me to talk about his collection. It's a whole different world for me. I really never considered the actual physical pieces of art that go into making a digital movie that you've seen through the Pixar franchises. Like I mentioned before, if you have anyone else that you think would be good for these interviews, feel free to reach out to me on here. If you want to leave some comments, I love seeing those. We can communicate that way too. Otherwise, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.